Okay, welcome back to Lucid Literature, everyone. Today I want to cover The Masque of the Red Death, one of my favorite stories to cover, and a story that is incredibly timely and appropriate given where we are at in the pandemic, right? The pandemic just passed its 2-year mark, and so there's many themes that are resonant in this story that we can see happening in real time, which is really fascinating, right? To go back to that question, does art mimic life, or does life mimic art? One of the great aesthetic philosophical questions. So today I want to talk about foreshadowing, specifically in The Masque of the Red Death. Of course, this is for my English 1102 class at Young Harris College, but if anybody stumbles on this and finds it informative or interesting, please leave a comment in the comment section. I'm trying to grow this space for discussion and dialogue about really cool literature, so please leave your brilliant insights. We'll be much obliged. Okay, so foreshadowing. Again, foreshadowing is just clues or indications or evidence that let us know that something is going to happen in a story. Now, a big moment of foreshadowing is just the title, The Masque of the Red Death. Now, we have masque, which is a noun, and it describes a type of 18th, 17th century style ball, style party. You could read more about that type of party. And it's also a pun on mask, M-A-S-K. Now, we'll see both of these definitions of the word play a huge role in the story. Okay, so just briefly what's going on. We have a prince named Prince Prospero who invites 1,000 of his courtiers, however you pronounce it, and trusted followers into his keep, his castle, his mansion, his estate to escape a pestilence, the Red Death, which sounds like the Black Death, and we can definitely draw parallels to that, or any just kind of like disease, right? Well, we do know it is devastating. It says it's devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. So this is very bad. So he invites 1,000 of his followers, his trusted advisors, his servants, etc., into his castle. Things are going well for about 5-6 months, and he decides to show his support and love and mostly just wealth, right? He's full of hubris and pride and wants to show his wealth off. So he has this magnificent ball, this masque, as it is. And the way this is set up, right, there are 7 rooms, and each room corresponds to a color. We have blue, we have green, we have purple, we have white, we have orange, we have velvet, we have black. And so that's going to be important, right? So I want us to think about, before we even really get into the meat and potatoes of foreshadowing, think about the number 7. The 7 is going to be a pretty big clue as to the sinister, spiritualesque nature of this tale. All right, so the party is going on, and all of a sudden the clock strikes midnight, and the clock is this ebony clock in the back room, and this shadowy figure appears with a corpse-like mask and the stink, and he's upright, and he's very, very grotesque and surreal. And he starts walking towards the back room, and the partygoers, revelers, are shocked, and some are terrified. The prince is at first shocked, but then his hubris and pride gets a hold of him, and he wants to chase this intruder down. And as he gets close with his knife drawn, the figure turns around, and Prince Prospero is killed, right, from the plague. And then the revelers jump on the masked figure, and then they all subsequently die. So we get a clear indication that this is the Red Death personified, the Red Death incarnate. Okay, very scary. Ooh. So let's talk about how foreshadowing gets us to this moment. First off, again, look at the adjectives. Devastated, fatal, hideous. We get clues that something is going to be devastating, fatal, and hideous in the story. We get this is going to be a story of death and destruction. We then go down, and let's talk about the 7 rooms, right? Now, on one hand, we think of 7 in terms of numerology. We think of the 7 deadly sins: sloth, greed, lust, envy, and so on and so forth, which is interesting, right? So 7 has kind of a deadly connotation as a number. We also can think of the rooms in terms of color theory and the stages of life, right? Now, this is a bit more difficult, we think of color theory, because not every color can fit neatly into our stages of life patterning here, but we can try our best. Now, when I talk about color theory, I think of the metaphorical significance that we attribute to some colors, right? We think of white stands for purity, but it could also stand for nothingness. We think of the vast expanse of the Antarctic, for instance. Black is death, the unknown. Red is blood, passion, hot, lust, etc. Blue is chill, calm, cool, collected, innocent, right? Green is envy. Green is fertility. Green is life, etc. And so in a story that uses color this way, obviously, we need to pay attention to the metaphorical significance. It's also important to see where these rooms are oriented. We have the blue room on the east side of the building, oriented east side, and then we have the black and velvet rooms oriented west, right? So we think of the sun rising in the east, we think of the sun setting in the west. The sun setting symbolizes the end of things, death, etc. It's important that the Masque of the Red Death makes his way from the east to the west, as if to signify the passage of time, as if to signify the passage of life. Now let's break down color theory a bit more finally, right? So that at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue. Now, if we associate the colors with, in this case, the 7 stages of life, if we don't associate with the 7 deadly sins, although I want us to associate that as well, blue might stand for innocence or childhood or birth. The second chamber was purple. Purple is a color associated with royalty, what the prince is. So maybe, for the prince rising from childhood into royalty as a teenager. The third was green, which symbolize the fertility of adolescence, the youthfulness of adolescence, the virility of adolescence. The fourth was furnished lighted with orange. Perhaps orange stands for strength, right? We're getting young adult stage, middle age. We get this idea of a person that is at the top of their game with strength. The fifth with white, so we get this idea of purity, right? We're starting to come into knowledge. The sixth with violet, wisdom, the wisdom associated with old age. And the seventh is black, that hung all over the ceiling, down the walls, folded in heavy carpets of the same material and hue. But this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond with the decorations. The panes here were scarlet, a deep blood color. Clear example of foreshadowing. So in the final room, we get this clear indication of death and decay. Okay, and so then we get, the Masque of the Red Death. We get the ebony clock, which is in the final room. And that ebony clock is black, which again symbolizes death, destruction. So again, all of these colors need to be taken for what they are, examples of foreshadowing and metaphors. And then, of course, we get the clock ringing. Clock is a big example of foreshadowing as well, with the ringing of the clock. The clock strikes midnight. Midnight is a mystical kind of witching hour, and that is when the Red Death appears. And then we continue to get color. The blood-colored panes, the blackness of the sable drapery appeals, right? And so we get the sense of death and destruction. We also get the sense that the revelers are dressed up kind of grotesquely and as phantoms, in an assembly of phantasms. And so we do some context clues, and we come to the determination that they are dressed like ghosts. There are ghostly presences throughout. And as I said before, then the Red Death comes in, kills Prince Prospero, and then proceeds to kill everyone else. Now again, there's obvious foreshadowing with the way in which the Red Death is personified. He's personified as a tall figure who stands erect and motionless within the shadow of the ebony clock. All right, so in the shadow of this darkness and death and time, right? We think of, when we're born, our time starts ticking down, right? We're going to live, hopefully, long, long, happy lives. But there's no denying that right when we're born, we start the slow process towards death. It's a macabre thought, but it's real. And so that he's standing in the shadows of the black, read death clock, read, time, is important. Gasp in an utterable awe at finding the grave cerements and corpse-like masks. So grave, in this case, refers to somber. It's an adjective, but it could also make us think of the noun, the grave, and corpse-like mask. Again, clear example of death. Now, what are some themes here? Well, one theme seems to be the inability for humans to escape the natural world. We have a lot of hubris from the prince. He thinks that he can escape the disease with just his immense wealth and power, but we find out that even he can't escape death. That seems to be a big one. The second is a critique against immense amounts of wealth. Now, this isn't a literary theory class, but if we read this from a Marxist perspective, and people have, we might critique things such as wealth inequality. We might critique things such as the way wealth is portrayed in the story, right? It's portrayed as being out of touch with the natural material world. So that is also important to take notice. At any rate, I hope this helped y'all see how foreshadowing is making its appearance, like the Red Death itself, in the story. Hopefully everybody took something out of this. Thank you very much for joining me today on Lucid Literature. I'm Dr. Joshua Martin, and I bid thee all a farewell. Have a good rest of your day.